The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam, and we're here because there's huge news that we have to talk about, which is, of course, the Phoenix Suns are bringing back the purple jerseys, and we had to have an emergency podcast to talk about that. Sam, how you doing?
Ring the alarm. Sound off. We need to talk about the purple jerseys. The purple jerseys are cool, by the way. I would like to get one. It seems like I don't know. We'll save that for later. I'm doing all right. I guess we're kind of sad, but we also are relieved. Is that sort of a
I don't know what the right word to put on it is.
I think that's proper for how I feel.
It's not like relieved. It's disappointed. I'm disappointed. I mean, ultimately. And what we're talking about, in case there's somebody who just, has been away from the internet and just hit play on a podcast, it was announced by every reporter possible this morning, on Tuesday morning, that Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets came to an agreement. That was a very specific wording all over this, that he will remain with the Brooklyn Nets, and they plan to just play the season out the way it is currently. The trades are no longer being discussed. Everything is over. The dream is dead. Phoenix Suns are no longer in the race. And, of course, that all happened right after we found out that supposedly Mikal Bridges was offered in a trade, which the Suns are now fighting back the narrative that he was offered now. So it's official, I guess, that Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns, at the very least, is not going to happen right now. I guess how much you want to believe that it could still happen in the future is probably just based on whether you're an optimist or not. But right now, the Suns are essentially, right now, we don't know what's going to happen now, because I do think that now that this is over, there could be a flurry of moves that happen, Suns or not, that could change rosters up a little bit in the NBA based on people waiting for Kevin Durant. But right now, the Suns basically have the exact same roster minus JaVale McGee, and added a couple guys who are at like the 10th, 11th, 12th spots on the bench. Yep. And it's just, it's odd. I don't know what to... I have some thoughts on how I feel right now, but like it's an odd place to be, I think, for the organization.
It's definitely an odd place to be at for the organization. Look, I am disappointed too, because I really wanted Kevin Durant. That being said, we ultimately could not force him to come here unless he was willing to put his foot down and really force his way out of the organization when push comes to shove, because we talked all along about how he's got 4 years left on his contract, yada, yada. And it was essential that KD pretty much not engage in this partnership, if you want to call it that he now supposedly has between him and Steve Nash and Sean Marks and Joe Tsai. That he would really have to sit out of training camp and maybe sit out of part of the season and demand, no, this is where I want to go, and I want to go to Phoenix. And that, that all of that would have to break right for the Suns in some way always seemed somewhat far-fetched. Mm-hmm. Of course, at this point, you can still hold out hope. Personally, I'm very skeptical of this current partnership in Brooklyn. I think there's a 0% chance that Kevin Durant plays out the rest of that contract in Brooklyn, and I think it's very likely that he is ultimately traded sometime in the next year or so, regardless. But is the Suns' potential offer, if they, supposedly the Nets aren't interested in Mikal Bridges plus picks. I doubt they would be interested in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson plus picks. It doesn't seem like the Suns' offer has any potential to get better. And maybe other teams have the potential to create better offers at some point in the next 6 to 12 months. So, yeah, we're really at a point where we can, I think, unfortunately move on from this and start to pivot. As for where the Suns roster currently is as of today, I do not hold it against James Jones, against any members of the front office, that they pursued Kevin Durant for this long. I just don't. We were, for one moment in time in this fan base's history, I guess there were some exceptions, but for the most part, 95% of people were in agreement that this was a legendary Hall of Fame game-changing player, the type of player who can be a number one on a championship team. Usually you don't get that level of agreement within a fan base to begin with. And so for one shining moment, we were all in agreement that this was a guy that we had to go out and pursue. So I don't regret for a second, as painful as the last 2 months were, to come up with podcast content every week, for example. I don't regret that they pursued him to this point. That being said, yeah, the roster is not in the great.
Let's hold off on that just a second, though.
Yeah, we have not all is not hunky dory. We have work to do. Let's just put it that way. There's a lot of work to do.
I just want to just agree with you on that point because look, I think the fact that the Suns were even in the running for Kevin Durant says a lot about the organization in general. But the other part of it is the fact that James Jones understood what I think you and I believed to be the problem with this team ultimately, to the extent that he was willing to essentially put the entire offseason on hold to try to trade for Kevin Durant, shows an understanding of what this team needs to compete at the highest level. And that is more offense, essentially, more star-level offense because
shot creation,
exactly.
Shot creation.
Yep. You can do a lot with role players during the regular season. Things tend to break down if there's not additional guys who can attack off the dribble in the postseason. So they showed that alone, and the fact that they didn't change and sort of give up on it before the last second, I think was also smart. You have to do what you can in order to potentially make that move. Did we, and we being you and I and maybe the rest of Suns fans, and I won't put this on anyone outside of the Suns fan base because I think they properly sold this, but did we undersell the amount to which DeAndre in signing that offer sheet sort of ended the possibilities for the Suns to trade for Kevin Durant? And I guess I'm asking that hypothetically because my answer to that is probably yeah. I think I broke it down recently on Discord and just in messages to you and our other friends, just essentially saying our offer went from DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges, essentially, and then you can put in whatever amount of picks to just Mikal Bridges and picks. I don't know what you want to say, but that's worse. That just becomes a worse offer. So from the Nets' perspective, they waited as long as possible to try and convince Kevin Durant to change his mind, and they effectively did. Now, if you want to say DeAndre Ayton can still be traded, and now that can come January 15th, maybe they're just holding off to try and trade him on January 15th or as quickly as they can. You might be right. It's possible that things, just because Kevin Durant is staying in Brooklyn doesn't mean things are going to go right in Brooklyn. He asked for the general manager to be fired. He asked for the coach to be fired. He asked to be traded, and he continued that trade demand for 2 months. Things may not go right there. And, from the other side of that, things may not go right in Phoenix. And, there is a possibility that when DeAndre Ayton is allowed to be traded, trade talks start up again. And if DeAndre Ayton agrees to it, because this is a reminder for everyone who forgot, DeAndre Ayton has the ability of vetoing any trade for this season alone. If he agrees to it, that's still something that could happen down the line if you want to hold on to hope.
Thank you. Thank you for that last line. I think a significant portion of us, again, understand how insanely talented Kevin Durant is and how much positive change he would have brought to this organization. That being said, I just can't do the hopium thing anymore. We've done 8 to 10 straight weeks of it. I'm not going to lie to the people here. I know you're not doing that either, by the way, but it's just like I'm willing to put it to rest and move on to other options, because if supposedly the Nets weren't interested in DeAndre Ayton this summer, I don't think they're going to be interested in DeAndre Ayton come January 15th, not compared to, say, the other options of, is Toronto putting Scotty Barnes on the table?
A lot can change between now and January.
Are the Celtics putting Jaylen Brown? It's going to be the same names circulating, maybe some new names as well. Who knows, man? Are the Thunder willing to put SGA on the table? He's one of possibly our pivot number one option. He's kind of my next guy who I'd be willing to start a hopium campaign over, if you will. But and the point is here, the Suns need to pivot, right? None of the pivots Well, I guess maybe this isn't necessarily true, so maybe I should ask in a more open-ended way. It feels to me, and you can comment on this, it feels to me like the Suns need to pivot. The pivot is not going to come before opening day, before training camp.
Yeah.
This feels to me like the roster going into the season. Now, that does not mean it's the roster going into the playoffs. And as I've said a million times before, if this is the roster going into the playoffs, barring some insane development on the part of DeAndre Ayton or Mikal Bridges that turns either one of them into a clear-cut, unanimous top 20, 25 NBA player this season, if you take this exact roster into the playoffs, you're going to get your ass clapped for a second year in a row in the second round. That's just kind of how things look.
And it could be worse depending on how Chris Paul looks at the end of the season.
But you do have plenty of time to make that pivot. And to bide your time until the trade deadline. But I just wanted to bring that up because I heard you say before you feel like a flurry of moves could be coming. Can you expand on that?
Well, let me just. A little bit? Well, I think there's it happened today. Even Isaiah Thomas tweeting out after Kevin Durant news was announced, he said, "Okay, can we sign now?" Referring to him and the rest of the guys who are waiting for roster spots. And there's still cap space out there for some teams, including the Suns. And I think that other trades were probably on hold, maybe even including the Donovan Mitchell trade, which we can talk about in a second, due to all of the assets that could have been involved in a Kevin Durant trade. But what I want to do, I think the way that we should frame this is now just quickly break down the Suns roster from two different perspectives. Now, I know what's going to happen today. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, yeah, Kevin Durant didn't sign on the Suns, but look how great everything is right now with the Suns. And from the perspective of we could be a 19-win team, they're 100% right. From the perspective of winning a championship, they're just wrong. They're just wrong. The Suns are not in the place where they, I think, can be taken seriously as a contender right now, especially in a West that is better than it was in the last two seasons when they arguably had the best chance that they've ever had to win a title. Now it gets harder, and one of their best players has gotten older. And I just want to say that from the perspective of, sorry that we're not necessarily going to be those guys that are going to talk you into this roster right now. But what you have right now
we shouldn't have
to. I mean, you guys know, you listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
We have Chris Paul, we have Devin Booker. Chris Paul and Devin Booker, maybe the only two players we knew for sure were going to be on the team at the beginning of this, meaning the two players that probably were most involved with recruiting Kevin Durant, right? Can we say that? There's nobody else that we can say for sure was involved, right?
No, it's those two guys. I do wonder what they're thinking right now, though.
Exactly. This is my point. This is exactly where I'm going with this. You have those two guys who wanted Kevin Durant. Now they're coming back onto the team. You have Mikal Bridges. You have Cameron Johnson. Two guys that were in the most rumors to be traded for Kevin Durant. You have DeAndre Ayton, who returned on an extension. Yes, he got his money, but he had to sign on another team to do it, and everybody knows that they were trying to trade him for Kevin Durant. Then you have Jay Crowder, who effectively asked to be traded off of the team essentially 2 weeks ago. And that is your main core of guys that's returning back to this team. And then, of course, you have other guys. You have the new guys that are back. You have Dario Saric, who's coming back. You have Bismack Biyombo, sort of the guys who are just happy to be here. But your main core of players, you could make a case for every single one of them that they may not be fully happy with what the Suns are doing to return this next coming season.
I mean, the vibes definitely feel off.
I just, beyond that though, I just want to do one more perspective from this, because now that I've killed everybody's hopes and dreams. The Suns also have every first round pick that they can possibly have of their own for the next few years. They have Mikal Bridges on a good and tradable contract. They have DeAndre Ayton on a good and tradable contract. They're likely going to sign Cameron Johnson to an extension. They have Monty Williams signed long-term. They have Devin Booker signed long-term. And they have James Jones, for as much as people want to gripe about him right now and today, has done a good job as a general manager for the Phoenix Suns, has only made them better in every year that he's been a general manager.
Has only increased their win percentage by 300%.
Yes. Exactly.
Or so.
So, let's just say, right now, the team that they have, you could make a case, once again, that every single player could potentially at least be a little bit upset with what happened this offseason, assuming nothing else happens, of course, going into the season. Beyond that, you still have a general manager with essentially a war chest of assets that he could potentially use to upgrade the team in the future. That war chest of assets, as we've talked about on this podcast, means nothing if you never do anything with it, but they still have it. And I think those are the two perspectives I am juggling with right now as far as how this team looks going forward.
Well, I think juggling is the right word because I really think we're in a place of uncertainty that we haven't been before, and we do kind of all know the answer, I think, that something has to change. By the way, when you talk about all these players and the potential for discontentment among them, it's very natural, and in fact, I've seen some people reply like to various tweets of yours this way. Like
they're adults. This is their job.
Exactly. You knew exactly where I was going for it. They're adults.
These are the bootstraps guys, right? Yeah. They pretend like humans aren't humans.
Well, they're old timers. They're real '80s NBA fans, if you will.
Right.
But the thing is, like, those people aren't necessarily wrong, and in fact, there are guys on this roster where if you had to ask if I was willing to bet, would they be professional and just play through it? And like, I think Mikal Bridges has done. He's basically just been trolling the fan base on Twitter with his tweets. Like he understands what's going on, but he's gone about it in a very tongue-in-cheek way that I don't actually think reflects that anything about his game or his approach to the game of basketball is going to change. That's just his personality. Now, for some of these other guys,
Jay Crowder.
I don't know. It's just that we can't guarantee anything. Like, yes, these guys are adults. Yes, I don't believe that these guys' feelings are actually all hurt to the point that, I don't know, it is causing this catastrophic identity crisis in all of them. But can I guarantee you that it's not going to affect their play next year? That it's not going to affect the team's chemistry? It's just the vibes compared to last year, when you came in off the momentum of being in the finals and it felt like everyone was on board and everyone was totally bought in, like not just the fans, not just James Jones, but the players were buying into hashtag internal development, hashtag continuity. This year it just doesn't feel like that.
I think that if you're trying to make the case, not you, but those imaginary reply guys that we were just talking about, if you're trying to make the case that they're not just going to come in and give up on the season, of course you're right. They're not going to do that. But can chemistry be like 10% off compared to last year? And how much does that impact a team that already is coming off of one of the most embarrassing Game 7s ever? Probably the most embarrassing. Along with, by the way, a much better West. I'm going to keep reiterating that. A much better West. And how much can those things compound on each other and potentially build to what could be a... I'm not going to say disaster, but like I'm also going to say that if I was James Jones, I would be trying to make some small move or like slightly big move right now before the season starts, just to shake things up a little bit and not make these guys go back into it with the exact same team they had last year, which is essentially what they're doing right now.
Yeah, I could honestly just see them going in with the exact same team. But it depends. If we're now transitioning into the portion of the pod where we talk about contingency plans again, we've done this before. I think the names mostly haven't changed. Go ahead.
Just remind people to go back and listen to that episode too if you haven't already. I know that at the time that we recorded it, people probably were less interested in contingency plans as they are right now. But about a month ago, we recorded a podcast that literally just says contingency plans in the title. Go back and listen to that. We break down all of them. We can reiterate some of them here.
I think
but that one goes into it in detail.
I think it's only like half the episode anyway, maybe 2/3 of the episode. But so it's like 40 minutes. We go over 5 or 6 names. And I think those names are pretty much exactly the same.
Some more realistic than others, I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk to me about one guy that I think is maybe realistic that the Suns could acquire between now and the start of training camp if they really wanted to shake things up, I've had ecstatic Knicks fans in my mentions all day. And make of that what you will, but Julius Randle is very available. He just is. And we've talked about him before. We talked about him in that contingency plan episode. I don't know, Mike. I'll put it like this. I mean, where I stand on the Julius Randle thing, I think, which is that he's not I mean, he's not SGA. He's not.
Can
Kevin
you just
Durant.
say what the Suns would trade for him so that people aren't freaking out that you want to trade Cameron Johnson?
I tweeted this. Yeah, I tweeted this earlier. I said, and I think this reflects exactly what my point is about Julius Randle. That Julius Randle is the perfect buy low option out of all the hashtag or quote unquote stars, if you even want to call them that at this point, out there. Because I said, I don't want to trade Cam Johnson. I don't want to trade Mikal Bridges. Just match salaries by giving them Jay Crowder, who may not want to be here anyway, and either Landry Shamet or Dario Saric. Give them a first-round pick. If I had it my way, it would be a protected first-round pick. I don't know. You can haggle over that. But Knicks fans immediately retweeted it, like a lot of Knicks fans, a lot of like Knicks content creators, and said, yes, this is great. This is amazing, which almost makes me, when you get the other fan base on board to that degree, now I start thinking, well, okay, maybe we could get away with just doing a second-round pick here. You know what I mean? Like that's when, and if I'm not getting some level of death threats from the other fan base, then I'm maybe thinking I've gone too far in one direction and we can rein it in a little bit. Yeah. But I do think it just points to they're mostly desperate to get rid of that guy. Does that make you nervous if you're a Suns fan? Sure. But also Jay Crowder, again, for the fifth time on this episode today, might not want to be in Phoenix regardless. Like, what do you have to lose, I guess?
Let me just
what do you
say
have
something
to lose if you make that swap?
About Jay Crowder here. I'm sorry, Jay Crowder. Julius Randle. 2020, 2021, Julius Randle averaged 24 points on 56% true shooting. Last year, he dipped to 20 points per game on 50% true shooting. For those who don't understand true shooting fully, just know that that's bad. That's well below league average, and that's bad for the amount that he shot. But in previous seasons, if you're just looking at his advanced stats alone, he has had multiple seasons over 60% true shooting, and even in the 1920 season, which was still kind of low for him, it was like 53.8, which is around league average, slightly below league average for players like him. Your point about him is that essentially when he was at 24 points per game, 56% true shooting, it would have taken a lot to trade for him. Now that he's 20 points per game, 50% true shooting, it wouldn't take much to get him, but maybe that 20 points at 50% true shooting isn't what he actually is. Maybe he's a lot closer to what he was previously. Maybe not 24 points, but maybe like 20 points at 58% true shooting on a team as a third option instead of being the first option. With first option on a team with his home team fans booing him at home.
Let's be very clear. Julius Randle would not be a 25 or 24 point per game guy on the Phoenix Suns, but you're not acquiring him. You don't trade Jay Crowder, Landry Shamet, and a protected first round pick expecting to get a 25 point per game first option on a champion like that. Those are absurd expectations for what you're holding the value of that trade package to, right? Yeah. Rein in the expectations here of what this is. There's a reason his value is what it is. Remember a few weeks ago when we had the conversation, swap Andrew Wiggins, who the Warriors paid $100 million in luxury tax penalties to this past season as they won the championship. Swap Andrew Wiggins with Jay Crowder. I asked you, do the Warriors still win the championship? And you hesitated. Because Andrew Wiggins had just enough games where he wasn't the first option, but he had just enough games as the third option in the Western Conference Finals and Finals, where he had 25 points and 12 rebounds when you didn't necessarily expect him to, and voila, you won the fucking thing, right? So it's a similar concept here of Jay Crowder just can't give you that. Julius Randle might be able to give you those types of performances as the third option once every 4 games, and in the finals, in a contested series, that could matter a lot. Does that mean that Devin Booker is going to play to the level of Steph Curry as like the true number one who can really lead the entire system? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. That's a conversation, a debate for another day. But the Suns are desperate for shot creation. This guy's a shot creator, plain and simple. Like, to me, if you're not giving up Cam Johnson, if you're not giving up Mikal Bridges, again, he's not SGA. He's not like the ideal star that you could pivot to, but as a buy low candidate, it's just
he did average. It is bizarre. This could just be his one outlier season, 2020, 2021, but 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists on 56% true shooting is like an insanely good player just looking at the stats alone. It's just hard to believe that I don't know. I understand why you would bring him up. I'm not fully convinced. It's a tough thing because I'm not like I think Harrison Barnes. If you just put Harrison Barnes in that spot instead of Julius Randle, the Suns would be a better team throughout the regular season with Harrison Barnes than Julius Randle. I think just from that perspective alone, just because the fit is so seamless. Would they be a better team in the playoffs? That's a different question. I don't actually know in that case. Maybe Julius Randle is better. Not to mention, look, he's not just necessarily he wouldn't fit in seamlessly offensively. You have to change your offense a little bit to fit a guy in like him. But could he be a guy who runs the offense for a quarter when nobody else has it? Yeah, potentially. And he's big enough to send passes over guys that other guys can't.
Might I remind people? I'm sorry if I'm starting to get a little animated here. Who is the backup point guard on this team, right? Like if we
I guess it's still Payne.
It's Cam Payne.
They clearly believe in him.
Do you trust that? Like, are you comfortable with that? Because that's like we've talked about this, and it's kind of absurd, right? So if you could have someone like Julius Randle come in, run the second unit a little bit, take some pressure off Cam Payne. Hey, if there's one thing we do know about Cam Payne, I mean, all of his percentages across the board dipped last season, but he still did hit a decent amount of his catch and shoot threes. At the very least, he can give you that. If he can't run an offense, I do think he can give you that. But Harrison Barnes can't do that.
Can we just acknowledge that we're talking about going from Kevin Durant to Julius Randle and how insane that is?
Why is it insane? Why is it insane?
It's just so depressing. It's just depressing.
I've been doing this for months.
Give me
my flowers. Give me my flowers. This has been my narrative. I'm ready to run this fucking shit into the ground. I don't care how many people hate me for it. This is about to be my entire fucking brand.
It's just depressing, man. It's just depressing to go from like a guy who's like one of the greatest players of all time to a guy who had a good season once, and you're betting and banking on him potentially getting back to whatever that was. And by the way, has had trouble fitting in on every team that he's been on in Julius Randle, so that's a little scary too.
The masochist that I am, and the masochists that I know most Suns fans are, I find it, again, freeing. My spirit is free from the last 8 or 10 weeks that we've been talking about this stuff. And honestly, like, if you haven't found it within you to laugh a little bit about this stuff by now, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
This has been a frustrating offseason, but it's also just basketball. And from the just basketball perspective of it, when you take a step back, it's kind of funny. I'm sure Chris Paul doesn't see it that way as he's trying to scrap to a ring in his 18th season or whatever. But from an outsider's perspective, it's a little funny.
Who were the other? Okay, so we had Harrison Barnes. We had Julius Randle. Look, there's another guy, an obvious guy out there we at least have to mention. Donovan Mitchell still hasn't been traded. The Suns don't really have a team that just makes sense for him on paper unless they trade Chris Paul for him, which, by the way, I would do if we could do it. Just for the record, it may not be perfect for the Suns, but like it just adds more star power to the team for the future, and it makes an interesting team to build around. Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. There's no reason to do that, but it's just something to throw out there. I don't think the Suns have enough assets as far as picks, just based on the Knicks having potentially up to 8 picks to do it. The Suns could offer 4. And the Knicks could just counter with 6 and then get it done on their end. So just throwing him out there. Is there anyone else that stands out to you as what the Suns could potentially pivot to either now or even, a month or 2 into the season? It doesn't necessarily have to be by the trade deadline or at the trade deadline. It could be sooner.
Sure. I mean, I can think of other guys that you've brought up, not me in the past. Like, how about your guy Kyle Kuzma? Are we still there?
I mean, Kyle Kuzma, I just don't think he's available. I think you might have to overpay for him. I think he has a player option after this year, so like you have the ability of potentially convincing the Wizards to, hey, give Jay Crowder a try and try to surround Bradley Beal with defense, and maybe we'll be the team that takes a gamble on Kuzma and tries to re-sign him later. That's a guy that could potentially be available, but you might have to overpay. He's a good rebounder, not a perfect shooter, but he's got some dribbling skills as well that could help the team.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I think Kuzma is a little overrated at this point in his career. I don't actually think he's that great, which is why
he's a good fit, though, right?
I don't know. I mean, based on what?
Size, athleticism, ability to dribble, and then I think defensively, I think he kind of could guard some of the guys that if Jay Crowder was gone, that Jay Crowder was sort of tasked with guarding.
I will say the athleticism out of all the things you said there, because, the shooting is suspect. The rebounding, his rebounding numbers did improve, but most of it was defensive rebounding, which sometimes I feel like is more scheme-based than anything that you can actually glean out of that. Out of all the stuff you said there, athleticism is maybe the most compelling to me. I would be most inclined to agree with that. I do think if there's one thing Julius Randle's not going to solve on the Suns, it's that the Suns have a lot of ground-bound players who don't exactly get up there. Whether it's for rebounding, whether it's for rim protection. I mean, they have a couple. They have DeAndre Ayton, obviously. But the Suns could use some more athleticism, and I do think Kuzma would provide that. Yeah, he would be an upgrade in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
anyone else?
Outside of those, let's see. We mentioned Barnes. We mentioned him. We mentioned Mitchell, Randle.
SGA is like this long-term vision that if he's just unhappy being with OKC, for those who didn't listen to the other episode, that's like this long shot that if he becomes available and you haven't traded all your assets for Kevin Durant, well, then you pivot and trade for him, and that would be ideal. He's friends with Chris Paul, would be a perfect fit next to Devin Booker long-term when Chris Paul's gone, and I think would enjoy being coached by Monty Williams. I think he'd be an excellent fit, but that's something that's just, it can't happen now. For example, it would have to be trade deadline or next offseason.
I think those are all the main targets at this point, though, unless people want to drop other suggestions. You're always welcome to do so.
Yeah.
I guess we have heard other names. I think some people still bring up Lowry, Markkanen, that is.
Yeah. There's no way they trade him.
He's fine. I mean, he's not a big deal to me, to be honest.
I think he's an interesting fit because he's huge and he can play power forward, which is just a rare combination. Defensively, he showed a lot for the Cavs this last year that I think I just didn't expect. He guarded a lot of threes. He was essentially their small forward in their starting lineup, and I didn't expect him to be able to move his feet the way he did. So that combination of size and ability to shoot without losing a lot defensively is something that you don't really get from anyone else in the Suns.
Yeah, he's all right.
I like it. I just don't think he's available.
He's fine. I don't see him as a huge upgrade over Crowder. That's, I guess, all I'm saying. Other obvious upgrades over Jay Crowder for a starting forward spot. No, I don't see it. Which brings us.
Send him to us.
Go
I
ahead.
think let's take a quick break, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. But if you have any other options that you can think of as contingency plans, send them our way. We'll talk about them on a future episode. And there's a chance that by the time we record next, something has happened because the Suns may have. Now's the chance to do something before the season. There's not a lot of time, 4 weeks before training camp starts at this point. So now's the chance to do something. We'll be right back. Sam, last week I mentioned that I asked you a question about Jay Crowder. And my question for you was, based on what's happened this offseason, how likely do you think it is that Jay Crowder is on the team by the time the season starts? And then how likely do you think it is that Jay Crowder is on the team when the season ends? And our answers sort of differed a little bit. But now, after all that, my conclusion on all that was, if Kevin Durant is traded somewhere else besides the Phoenix Suns, that Jay Crowder is essentially done in his time with Phoenix. Cameron Johnson's eligible for an extension right now. And if Cameron Johnson is extended and he makes somewhere between $15 and $20 million a year, which he likely will make, you got to start him at that point. Is there any reason to bring Jay Crowder back onto the Suns to come off the bench as someone who already is unhappy with his role on the Phoenix Suns right now? Is there any reason to bring him back?
Well, sure, because regardless of what you say, and just for the record, I'm all aboard the Cameron Johnson starting train at this point. I'm all the way there. I was kind of leaning into it several weeks ago, thinking, yeah, this is probably the way we're going to have to go. Then the stuff with Jay happened in the last couple weeks. Then the KD news broke. And at this point, I'm just look, if the Suns are going to prevail this season, if they're going to improve in any way, shape, or form and try and work past these obstacles, they need to get the development out of their younger guys, and Cam Johnson is a big part of that. And I think we talked about him recently in an episode about specifically kind of what he did when he was in the starting lineup and just reminding people of the impact that he had. So I'm all the way there. With Jay, my answer kind of remains unchanged from when you asked me last week.
Yeah.
I just if the offers aren't there, man, the offers aren't there. Like, this is something that
I get it.
For what it's worth, I think we should bring up, whether you want to believe him or not, what Gambo is reporting at this point is that he's under the belief that the Suns that
are looking for a post-up power forward.
Yes, A, that the Suns are looking for a post-up power forward, but B, that they're running it back to start the season, that he thinks they're bringing Jay back at least at the beginning, and I am inclined to believe that report. If the right offer is there, they will trade Jay. If they can't get what feels like an upgrade, I don't think they will. And, if Jay plays himself into an even worse position with even lower trade value by the deadline, so be it. I don't think they're going to relinquish him just for the sake of it, though. I think they're going to give it an honest chance, and we'll see what comes of that.
I think the Suns are probably going to try to trade him right now. Whether or not they do, I think is dependent on what they can get for him, depending on the assets that they're willing to attach to him. But I think the combination of Cameron Johnson, if they don't extend Cameron Johnson, that's a disaster. They just should do the things that they should do. And for the record, from the perspective of doing the things that they should do, they extended Devin Booker, they extended Monty Williams, they matched DeAndre Ayton's offer, and they should extend Cameron Johnson. There was a point in our analysis of the Phoenix Suns where we would just praise them for doing the things that they should do. We're past that. We're just past that. They should just do the things that they should do because that's what teams do, and then judge them based on what they do beyond that, because it's what they do beyond that that makes them a contender. If they're not meeting the basic levels of competency to just be an NBA team, which in the past they have not met those things, there has been seasons where they didn't meet those things, there's no reason to praise them for meeting them. It just is what they're supposed to do. And at this point, what they're supposed to do is extend Cameron Johnson. Had they extended DeAndre Ayton when they could have, there's a possibility Kevin Durant's on the team right now. They did not extend DeAndre Ayton when they could have. And look, maybe they tried and DeAndre Ayton wasn't willing to work with them, but maybe they should have tried a little harder too. At this point, they need to extend him.
We just know what they would have had to do. They would have had to offer the 5-year max right then.
They had to offer the 5-year max, or I don't know. I don't know what their other options were. Find a way to not make it the 5-year max, but to pay more. This is something David brought up, than other teams could.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about the negotiations between the Suns and Ayton last summer, I think Ayton and Duffy, as his representation, would have just turned that down. But that's fine.
Maybe they would have.
They definitely could have. You have a point that if they had done that, I don't know how everyone would have felt about that extension at the time. But maybe they would have had a better shot at KD.
So maybe. Now they have to extend Cameron Johnson. They extend Cameron Johnson. I think there's no way they're not at least trying to see what's out there for Jay Crowder at that point. That post-up power forward comment by Gambo, for those who missed it, Gambo said he thinks the Suns are looking for a post-up power forward.
That's so funny to me.
That's batshit insane. I think it's insane. There's no way they're looking for that. There's just no way.
Well,
who is that? Name one. Name one. LeBron James? That's the only one? I can't think of one other post-up power forward that exists in the modern NBA.
Right. Post-up power forwards don't exist anymore, which is the first thing that came to mind for me was Greg Monroe, do you remember what was his name?
DeAndre Ayton in college.
Monty Eunice,
Monty Eunice,
like Al Jefferson. My mind instantly went to 2014 era
Zebo
NBA of guys clinging on to what that.
I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge is out there, but he hasn't posted up in 3 years. He's more of a face-up guy at this point.
He's just gonna hit 18-foot mid-range jumpers, which maybe that would be fine. I don't know what I don't know what that's all about. I think that to me felt a little bit imprecise.
If he's just talking about LaMarcus Aldridge, that's hilarious. Yeah. I would consider that a win for the Suns to have a player that's capable of being a relief valve offensively. Not a perfect fit, but
how do you think James Jones, as a player GM, right? I feel like it's kind of a unique position for him to be in. Most GMs do not have the background that James Jones has. And at times that's been lauded as an asset that James Jones brings to the Suns front office. An ability to empathize with players and an ability to see their perspectives and understand that human element of basketball in a way that previous GMs, Ryan McDonough, cough, especially failed at. When it comes to a situation like what Jay Crowder is doing, the discontentment with the Suns organization, blurring the Suns logo or eliminating the Suns logo out of pictures and then posting that to social media. How do you think James Jones reacts to that? Do you think his reaction to that, we don't know what his reaction to that, but do you think that's informed by his player experience? Because James Jones never did anything like that as a player. He was always very locker room guy, very consummate professional.
Yeah.
But I'm sure James Jones shared locker rooms with many guys over the
Arguably the
years.
Jay Crowder on a few teams that he was on, right? Similar role.
In terms of just on ball, like on court, what they did.
Just a role player, plays defense, shoots threes,
I just wonder, I can't help but wonder when James Jones sees something like that, what is his reaction to it? I think there's a lot of analytic, the general like GM type, a lot of analytical stat boys who become GMs who are going to see that and they're going to react one way.
Look, I want to say that...
I just wonder if it hits James Jones differently when he sees that. If he's more willing to give second chances, if he's more willing to talk things out,
be honest,
and try and reach an agreement for all parties. And that's kind of going back to the whole Jay Crowder conversation, maybe where part of my prediction comes in as well, that they're going to try and make things work before they fall apart.
I think that I want to believe that James Jones would be the guy that just meets with a player when they're a malcontent, if you want to call them that, and has an honest conversation with them and says, here's what we're doing right now. If this doesn't work, we'll try and do something and work something out with you in the future. But Ricky Rubio, when he was traded, said that he was told he wasn't going to be traded from the Suns. And then he was. And I think that, from that perspective, I think there are times where the extent to which the Suns are tight-lipped in their negotiations can also extend to the players, because players are sometimes the people who leak. I think the impression of Shams Charania is that Shams gets a lot of his news from players directly, whereas Woj gets a lot of his news from general managers. And I think the Suns, in their pursuit to be as tight-lipped as possible, maybe are not always fully honest with players because they don't want something to get out before it needs to get out. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I like to hope that he's the type of person that would have an honest and direct conversation with these guys. But I think there is some evidence that that's not the case in Ricky Rubio.
Yeah, that's fair. That Rubio report, by the way, only came out, I think, that came out recently, didn't it? That came out this summer.
No, I think it was right after the trade.
Or was it after? Was it right after the trade?
It was in training camp after the trade.
I only remember seeing it this year, and I remember that it surprised me. I didn't think there was a big news cycle that came of it at the time, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Jay Crowder. I think there is a chance. There is a chance by the next time you and I record, which will be about a week from now, outside of a Patreon podcast, that we're talking about a slightly different roster, whether it be Jay Crowder or someone else. There are other assets that they can move. Or maybe at the very least, a Cameron Johnson extension, which should come soon. There's a few other things I want to talk about, but this one other thing I had in my notes that I wanted to talk to you about. It's something small, but I think that I want to dovetail it into a conversation about something bigger. And this was, the Suns recently added a front office member to their front office. His name is A.D. Malhotra. He's from Baylor. And Malhotra was on a podcast, a radio show recently that was released as a podcast in Texas, where Baylor is. And they interviewed him and asked him questions about coming to the Phoenix Suns. And there's something that he said there that I thought was kind of interesting. He said that his role for the Suns will be focused on scouting. It sounds like his role is sort of this dual front office / coaching and development role, where he scouts but can also help coach some of the young guys that join the Suns. But in that interview, he mentioned that the Suns front office is now ready to, quote, expand and grow. And he mentioned that they were trying to be what is considered like a top of the line front office in Phoenix. This was a interview that went a little bit under the radar, I think. Shout out to the person that sent it to us. And I think it was interesting from a couple perspectives. One, we heard about the draft from the article written pre-draft by Kevin Arnovitz and how the Suns just don't really care, right? Maybe don't have a lot of scouts, don't have a lot of guys involved. Now, after that, we've heard about a couple hires for the Suns front office, including Malhotra, who now is specifically signed to focus on scouting. College basketball in particular is something he mentioned. And I think it's interesting just from the perspective of the Suns showing a willingness to grow. After that, hopefully maybe it just comes from a place of shame, that they were embarrassed by that article, and now they're expanding and growing beyond that. But it sounds like from his perspective and what he knew, and there's a lot of Baylor guys, by the way, I think 8 different Baylor guys work for the Suns right now. And from that perspective, it sounds like he was under the impression that the Suns are trying to expand their front office. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, that might be, keep in mind he just got hired by the Suns, and so now he's representing the organization in all of these public front-facing interviews, right? So I think sometimes that lends itself to maybe a more rosy interpretation of how things are going. Certainly when I heard this news, and I heard it from you directly, so thank you for pointing my attention towards the interview, because otherwise it would have totally slipped out of my radar as well.
AM radio in Texas is where it came from.
I mean AM radio in Texas. Like, how am I supposed to find that? I think it's great news if the Suns are expanding their front office. I think it's great news if they're responding to the shame, even if it's in a sort of kind of damage control way, right? Like, if it's motivated by shame, so be it. It's still good news that they're finally putting some focus on the draft, because as we talked about in the past, their past couple drafts have been, or their lack of activity has been absolutely embarrassing. That being said, if they expand their front office from 6 to 9 people, where other NBA front office, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, right? I don't actually know, but if other NBA front offices have 30 scouts each, okay.
Yeah. You're right.
We've also said in the past that, scouting is such an imprecise science that continues to be in its infancy, to where no one's figured it out. And you can very clearly make a compelling case, as James Jones tried to do in the Arnovitz piece, that you don't need all of that manpower. You can go about it in your own kind of way and still feel confident in the choices you're making. The problem is, I think the Suns took it to an extreme, and they went completely to the other end of the spectrum, where they basically just used it to cover up the fact that it was a cost-cutting measure, in my opinion. They simply did not
want... G League team, at the very least, points to that.
They simply did not want to pay for these resources, and to
and
me,
now they do.
To me, it smelled like, at the time, James Jones being forced to cover for the cheapness of Robert Sarver. This could be an interest, and I know where you're going to go with this next, but to kind of get you there, this could be an interesting indication that maybe things there are moving in a positive direction. Of course, we don't know the status of the investigation still as of today, late August. But
this is where I want to go with it.
There you go.
Because it's interesting. I think, I'm not going to say that this is just an absolute sign of something, but we haven't talked much about the Robert Sarver investigation on this podcast. Part of the reason we haven't talked about it much, there's nothing to talk about. All we have gotten is a few updates from Adam Silver saying that it's close to an end. There was a moment in this whole Robert Sarver investigation saga where I thought we were close to him potentially being forced to sell, just based on some things that have been said behind the scenes and the timing of when the initial findings were supposed to come out, which was about 2 months ago at this point. Now, I am I have a theory that we are seeing the front office for the Phoenix Suns working in a manner that points to them potentially working essentially without an owner being in charge, at least temporarily in the future. Now, what that could mean for Robert Sarver is maybe he's forced to sell. I'm starting to lean to maybe that's not going to happen. But maybe Robert Sarver is now forced to take a back seat to the Suns. And now maybe somebody like James Jones is in charge, or somebody else, like some sort of figurehead, is placed in charge, and Robert Sarver is forced to take a step back from day-to-day operations. Maybe that's a suspension. Like maybe he's literally suspended from being around his team for a year or two, a season or two, and maybe that could be. You have something else to add there?
Well, let's be very clear that, at least in the way that things are supposed to work, in the ideal basketball organization, the owner is in charge of the financials, and that's fine.
Yeah.
The owner should never have say in the day-to-day basketball operations of an organization, and the extent to which, and this is much of the problem to begin with, I mean, this is not the problem as it relates to this specific investigation. That's
right.
About a very different type of scandal. But the gripe that a lot of people have with Robert Sarver, of course, is that he has been a very unique owner among NBA owners in that he has carried a lot of influence over saying exactly what his GMs in the past can and can't do, what his presidents of basketball operations can and can't do when it comes to the actual basketball team. And so we can only hope, just from a basketball perspective, that James Jones has a certain level of autonomy at this point that maybe hasn't always been acknowledged in the past.
A month ago, almost a month ago today, Morgan Cato was hired by the Phoenix Suns. Morgan Cato became the first black woman to be an assistant general manager for an NBA team. Morgan Cato also previously worked for the NBA. When Morgan was asked about what it was like meeting Robert Sarver, do you know what she said, Sam?
I don't know. What did
she hasn't met him. She hasn't met him at all. And this is the assistant general manager for the Phoenix Suns, somebody who went through the entire interview process to work for the Phoenix Suns without even meeting the owner. It's just,
that's
interesting. I think she deserves a role. I think it sounds like somebody who's probably going to be really good for the organization as a whole, and somebody who clearly came recommended by the NBA, maybe more than recommended. I don't know, but the idea that she would not meet Robert Sarver, and that the Suns front office is doing things that sort of are maybe antithetical to what Robert Sarver believes as far as cost cutting, could potentially point to an outcome of this investigation being some sort of version of the Suns working without Robert Sarver, short-term or long-term, depending on what happens with it.
The thing is, it's one thing for the Suns organization to work outside of Robert Sarver, be that temporarily or permanently. It's another thing for the Suns to make decisions in terms of, being as autonomous as to say we're going to expand, because the money has to come from somewhere.
Well, maybe
it implies
another owner is in charge temporarily. There are other people.
We've talked about
John
Najaffi in the past, and that's exactly where I was going with this. It implies that there are other sympathetic parties within the Suns organization, minority owners perhaps, who look at things differently and are willing to pump a certain investment into the organization. And again, all of this is speculation on our part. This is maybe the most we've talked about this in weeks, as you pointed out, Mike, because we just have not had anything to go on. The last update was 5 weeks ago from Adam Silver, where he said the organization was in its final stages.
It's close.
That was 5 weeks ago.
The investigation is close, yeah.
But now that Kevin Durant has been laid to rest...
He's still alive, for the record.
Sorry, perhaps poorly phrased. Now that the Kevin Durant trade rumors have been laid to rest, specifically the rumors to the Suns, we talked about contingency plans. Okay, there's still stuff going on with the basketball team, but kind of the overall greatest narrative, the greatest potential source of turmoil for this team right now is this. This is the next thing. This is the next pin to drop.
And I think there's even some outside pressure from the likes of Al Sharpton he's putting pressure on sponsors, which is one of the best ways to get things done in the NBA, is to go after their money. He's talking about PayPal potentially cutting ties due to this investigation just not happening, or just what we know is enough in his mind. And I think in some ways he's right. This, I think, is probably something that the NBA wants to get done before the season begins. If there is a scenario where the Suns are going to operate essentially without Robert Sarver calling the shots, they probably would want some sort of, I I don't know. I guess I can use the phrase again. Contingency plan. Some sort of line, a chain of command in place before they announce it. And it appears that if that were to happen, maybe it's close. Now, I want to preface all this by saying I don't know anything. I don't know anything other than just seeing everything that's happened and trying to put it all together in my mind to make some sort of sense of all of it. So for the record, if this does happen, it wasn't because I knew anything.
Clairvoyant Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but maybe not. Maybe nothing happens. Maybe it's just a slap on the wrist, or maybe on the other end of that, maybe they have to force him to sell. Maybe there's a sale already in place or something. We actually have no idea. But the way that things have operated, the way the Suns front office has operated with a form of autonomy that they never have operated with before is odd to me, and it stands out. Now, you can say maybe Robert Sarver is getting smarter, getting better. Look, I don't think there's a case to be made that he doesn't want to be involved with things. I think maybe you could say he's making better decisions lately, but I don't think that means he's not involved. I think he absolutely is involved in things if he can be, and we'll see what ends up happening there. I got nothing else on that. You have anything else?
No, let's move on.
Can we just say Dario Saric has a man bun and he's playing pretty well for Eurobasket right now? No transition there, right?
What a transition. What a fucking transition that was.
This is like, look, lowbrow and highbrow, I guess you can call us. I don't know. He has a man bun now.
Breaking news, Dario Saric has a man bun. He does have a man bun.
He looks skinny. And maybe he was playing power forward a lot, which is kind of interesting too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be kind of interesting. I think he has the capacity. He's always had the capacity to play power forward, right? Him playing center when he was most recently healthy with the Suns, that was like an exciting new development in the career of Dario Saric. Yeah. But there are certain lineups where it makes more sense for Dario to play power forward. And so, I definitely think the hybrid thing can still work for him for the Suns next year. It doesn't surprise me if you're asking me at all, by the way. It doesn't surprise me that he's skinny coming off an ACL tear.
Exactly.
That he would have shed some weight. It's a really tough recovery process. And I guess what we just really have to see, I've seen highlights, but I'm curious to see the actual matches in Eurobasket. It starts in 1 week. Will be 1 week from now is Croatia's opening game against Greece. I just want to see kind of the speed at which Dario takes the game. And, just because you lose weight doesn't necessarily mean your conditioning is in the right place. And that's the next step for me to see is he really ready for the big stage at the NBA?
Yeah, the shot looked good. I watched some highlights. The shot looked good. It's hard to watch these games, so sorry that we're not necessarily watching them live, but the shot looks good. He looks in shape. He looks skinny. He looks confident in his knees. I think that's something that takes some time. He had a lot of time off. I think when you have a severe knee injury, it takes some time to be confident in your legs again, and he looks like he's pretty close, and I think this Eurobasket tournament will probably help him.
It definitely is like a Dario Saric who's like, I'm just throwing out a number here. I don't know if this is true, but let's say he's 15 pounds lighter than he was when he last played with the Suns in the finals. He already wasn't an above-the-rim, great offensive rebound threat at center, right? So it implies like he can play center, but he's probably just going to lean even more heavily into pick and pop. And
how much would it even affect his defense at center? I mean, yes, there might be guys that try to push him around, but I don't think does it really matter?
I don't think it affects his defense. I do think it affects the overall defensive scheme if a significantly lighter Dario is pulling down 5.5 rebounds per 36, and he's playing center. That could be an issue.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There are certain areas.
We'll put him next to a post-up power forward, and then.
Well, if you put him next to Torrey Craig or Ish Wainwright,
Greg Monroe, he's a free agent.
Wainwright isn't necessarily such a great rebounder either. If you put him next to Torrey Craig, maybe it's not so much of an issue.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But otherwise, there's certain lineups. Basically, Dario's ability to actually, we joke a lot about him unlocking everything in the Suns' offense this year. He needs to let it fly.
What do you mean joke?
I do believe it to an extent, but he needs to let it fly. He needs to let it fly frequently.
He has to dribble some too, and he has to pass.
And he needs to dribble and pass. He just needs to take these things that were supposed to be his best assets coming into the NBA, where we've seen him succeed before, and kind of push them to their limits, because at this point in his career, I think we understand the athletic limitations of who Dario Saric is as a player. It doesn't mean that he can't contribute. He can still be a very positive contributor. But yeah, he just needs to shoot and pass the fuck out of the basketball, and hopefully he's capable of doing that.
Yeah, it's just like adding LeBron to your team, basically. I know we joked about it to start, but the Suns are adding back throwback purple jerseys, and they look fantastic. They introduced them in a video on their social networks with DeAndre Ayton in like some sort of 90s style video, and they look great, and he looks great in them, and DeAndre Ayton is like genuinely funny and stuff like that. And I'm actually thinking when I watch that, how come he's not in more stuff like being marketed, because he's funny and he like knows how to be kind of goofy. But what did you think of the jerseys?
Yeah, I'm excited. I definitely want to get one. It seems like it's going to be kind of hard to get one. So
the Suns announced the whole jersey and then said they're not for sale. Supposedly, thanks to Espo, we did hear that they should be available around training camp, so we'll see if they end up being available. But for those who haven't followed it, no Valley jerseys this year, which does kind of suck. Yeah. I think these purple jerseys sort of make up for the loss of those Valley jerseys.
They're trying to replace the Valley jerseys, but in a way, look, I'm not going to lie, that kind of sucks for me personally, because I actually never got a Valley jersey.
It's impossible,
They were impossible to get online.
You even flew all the way to Phoenix and they weren't here.
Exactly. They were impossible to get online, so I went to Phoenix one time last year. We saw a few games together, and I tried to go to the team shop a couple different times. They were out of Valley jerseys, so I was not able to procure one. But for the people who already have one, I do think it makes it more special that you're not like wearing them out, and that they kind of reflect a certain era of Suns basketball that hopefully people have fond memories of mostly. If we talk about the last 2 years, right? So
I will.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Hopefully we have just as many fond memories when we look back on the era of the rebirth of the purple 90s jerseys, and not that this was the era where the Suns collapsed entirely. and yeah.
They're returning the normal white home jerseys. They're bringing back the purple jerseys, replacing the Valley jerseys as essentially a black jersey with a orange gradient PHX on the front, for those who missed it. And then they have a special, I think, City Edition turquoise jersey, which is just a completely different color scheme that they're bringing back next year. So the jerseys will still be interesting, but the Valley jersey is going to be something that feels a little bit missing in that purple jersey, which looks amazing. We'll make up for it. I can't
wait until we're old enough to get like 2000s nostalgia, like
the ugly ones.
Bring me back.
Bring me the gray sleeve jerseys.
Bring me the not those. The gray sleeve jerseys, 2010s. That was the worst jersey they've ever put out.
Who was it Who was it that modeled the jerseys but never played a game for the Suns?
Caron Butler. He was in the orange one. You're thinking of the all orange jerseys with the sleeves. Those are bad too.
Ooh, those are bad,
I'm even thinking
Eric
about
Bledsoe era.
I'm thinking about 7 seconds or less era. Like orange.
Those are pretty ugly too. I mean, in my opinion,
the orange and gray jerseys or the purple and gray jerseys were pretty ugly. But I wouldn't mind if they brought them back at some point.
Oh yeah, I mean the nostalgia will definitely work on us. Like once we see Devin Booker put it on, we'll be like, nice. Like we're definitely gonna enjoy that. But gray is not a Suns color. I don't support that. But yes, that's all we got. You got anything else?
I think that's all for this week. We'll be back with Patreon episode tomorrow.
Yes, I think so.
Where we'll talk about some stuff. We have to think about
some stuff. Yes, and then back next week, maybe talking about some moves if the Suns make some moves. We appreciate you guys. If you want to join the Patreon, patreon.com/thetimeline.